Hi, and welcome to Conversations with B'nai B'rith International. I'm CEO Dan Mariaschin. Thank you for spending some time with us today. If you enjoy our conversation series, make sure you never miss an interview by subscribing to the B'nai B'rith YouTube channel and liking us on Facebook. And of course, be sure to visit our website, b'naibrith.org, to learn more about our humanitarian and advocacy efforts across the globe. Whether she's hosting her own TV program, releasing a New York Times best-selling cookbook, or sharing experiences from her Jewish-Mexican upbringing, James Beard award-winning chef Pati Jinich is a cultural and culinary force. She's the creator and host of the Emmy-nominated PBS series Pati's Mexican Table, which has brought Mexican flavors, colors, and textures into American homes and kitchens for more than 10 years. She also just released her third cookbook, Treasures of the Mexican Table, Classic Recipes, Local Secrets, an ambitious and deeply personal collection of recipes highlighted by the Washington Post, the New York Times, Glamour, and more as one of 2021's best. Pati's latest project, La Frontera, a PBS primetime docuseries released in 2021 and renewed for a second season, uses food as a vehicle to explore the culture and people along the Texas-Mexico border. And she draws on her diverse experiences both as a former political analyst and as someone who has lived her life moving between Jewish, Mexican, and American cultures as an immigrant to conduct in-depth interviews with locals in the region. We're so excited to have Pati here with us today to talk about this and more. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Dan. I want to continue hear you talking because you're giving me, as we say in Mexico, so many flowers. Thank you so much for the beautiful introduction. It's, when you, as you know, because you do the same, when you work so hard in something and you're like dip in the hole, you don't realize the things that you do until you hear them. When you were talking, I'm like, yeah, I did do that. I do that. I do that,
Well, you did.
Thank you.
You did, and you have. So my first question really is, what inspired you to go from being an aspiring political analyst, because you studied international affairs, to an award-winning chef? And how have you relied on your policy knowledge, because that's what you study, since you began hosting Pati's Mexican Table and writing a cookbook of the same name? Because in La Frontera, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, I think your nuance and your time studying international affairs probably helped a lot. So tell us about it.
Absolutely. So I wanted to be, as you say, a political analyst. I wanted to be an academic. I trained as I had a BA in political science in Mexico City. Then I did a master's in Latin American studies. I worked in a think tank, and I was working so hard in trying to find ways to contribute to Mexico, a country that welcomed, my family who were fleeing immigrants from different parts of the world from different historical times. And then I was trying to build a bridge with the US after I moved to the US. And I realized that I could do so much more if I connected to food, because I realized that I was very limited in the academic world. I needed to do something where I could connect with people more closely. And I mean, there's nothing that you can connect to more closely than the food, because you're eating it, right? So I always felt like lacking words. And of course, English is not my first language. So I always felt that a loss of words when I was writing and studying and researching. And I felt that through food, I could open up a door into a very noble space where I could talk about things that were more meaningful, more difficult. And I decided to jump into food. Now, as you say, a researcher at heart that I've always been, when I decided to jump into food, I resigned to a job I had at a think tank here in DC, the Inter-American Dialogue, and I decided to go into culinary school, because to do food writing and to try to connect with people through food, I wanted to have that backbone of theory, of culinary research. And I honestly, I thought that I was going to do food writing. I never envisioned myself having a cooking show or being on media. But once I started doing it, I absolutely loved it, and there was no turning back.
Well, how did growing up in Mexico City in a sizable and vibrant Jewish community influence your ultimate career choices and now your cooking? Mexico City, in terms of the Jewish community, is very interesting because there is a large Ashkenazi community. I know a large community from Lithuania, originally from Lithuania, and you also have Sfaradim. You have the Syrian community and others. So, did it have any impact on your original culinary instincts?
Oh my gosh, a huge impact, Dan. And it is funny because it is as time goes by that I realize how much impact it had and how much now I'm really diving into my Jewish origins and roots much deeper than before. So I grew up in Mexico City in a 100% Ashkenazi Jewish family. Both on my father's side and my mother's side, they were Ashkenazi Jews that had fled to Mexico for different reasons during different times. On my paternal side, the Drichansky Morgensterns fled from Poland. They came from Polish farmland, from shtetls that had been burnt one too many times, and they fled to Mexico. Well, they were trying to get to the US, but at a time when the Polish quota had been filled, so they went to Mexico, entered through Veracruz, and they made Mexico their home. And this was right after the Mexican Revolution, like really early on, like 19 teens, And then on my mother's side, it was also Ashkenazi Jews from Austria. There were Roth Gross. My grandmother was from Austria, from Wolfsburg. And my grandfather was from Czechoslovakia when they were together. So he would be from Slovakia today. And they fled to Mexico when the Second World War started. They were trying to get into the US again, but when they were trying to come into the US, now the Jewish quota had been filled. So by one way or another, both sides of my family found their way through Mexico. And I learned firsthand without realizing how cooking and food allowed them to blend their ancestry and who they were, especially through food, because my grandparents didn't talk much about their history or all they had been through. They just wanted our family to grow roots in Mexico. So there's stories that I'm now trying to dig in and they're gone. And but anyway, so they through food, they were able to intermarry or weave the foods that they had grown up with, a very Ashkenazi Jew, like the gefilte fish, the pechai, the matzo ball soup, the grivenes, the chont, the chocolate babka, and they wove them with the rich, colorful, delicious, bountiful Mexican ingredients. So for my Polish grandmother, she would make the white traditional gefilte fish, which you need an acquired taste for because it's, white, bland, and a fish aspic. You eat it with grain, if you're lucky, with a pickle and some challah. Well, she would make her gefilte fish as most Mexican Ashkenazis do, which is Veracruz style. Veracruz is the state that opens its mouth to the Gulf of Mexico, and it's welcomed most of the immigrant waves from the world. So it's very rich with threads of other cultures and cuisines. The Veracruz sauce is a thick, seasoned tomato base with olives and capers and pickled chilies, and you eat it hot. So it's like almost like fish meatballs. You don't need an acquired taste for that, So she would make the red, as we would call it, gefilte fish. She would make her grivenes and would top guacamole with it, and we would eat it with corn tortillas and tuck it into tacos, or make an early version of an avocado toast with like toasted challah and smashed guacamole or avocado and the grivenes on top. She always had a big jar of schmaltz in her refrigerator. She made her chocolate babka with Mexican cinnamon and chocolate. to give you a more intense example, my grandmother and all of these things I'm learning now, because, a year ago, the government of Austria, I think it was a year ago, they passed a law saying that if anyone could prove that they were victims of the Nazi regime and had to leave Austria, that if you apply, you can get citizenship to Austria too. So I have some cousins in Mexico who decided to apply for it, and they started researching, and we're finding out a lot of information. But it turns out that my grandmother came from a town called, and stop me because I talk a lot, Dan. But my grandmother came from a city called Wolfsburg, and she and her family were the only Jews there, and they had the general store. And when the Second World started, the store and the building where they lived was taken away from them. Their parents were sent immediately to Auschwitz and killed. And my grandmother was sent to the US, they thought, with like the money they had and a ring or something. And she was supposed to try and get papers for them to come to America. She didn't know her parents had been killed, and her sister was sent to another concentration camp, I think Bergen-Belsen, which she was there for years. And my grandmother thought that both her parents and her sister had been killed. And then through she found her way to Mexico, found my grandfather, married, started growing roots in Mexico. And like 3 years later, she found out through the Red Cross that her sister, Annie, had survived the concentration camp. She was in a hospital. It took months for her to heal and get better. My grandmother found a way to bring her to Mexico through the Red Cross. And my grandmother was just starting out in Mexico. She was like sewing hats and sweaters. And then she became a successful businesswoman, but really started from scratch. But she brought her sister with the help of the Red Cross to Mexico. And my Aunt Annie went on to be the first person to open an Austrian bakery. So as you can see, food has always had so much meaning in my family, and I suspect to all Jews. So she started an Austrian bakery, and she would make her apple strudel with the Mexican walnuts, with the Mexican canela and cinnamon. She would make her sachertorte with Mexican vanilla from Papantla. And, chocolate comes from Mexico. So it was by way of food that I saw them grow roots and thrive and make Mexico their home. And after I moved to the US with my husband, and with I wasn't happy with my career. I was very homesick for Mexico, and didn't really feel like I was in the right direction in my profession. And it was really through and by way of food that I could make sense of myself and my history and what I could contribute to the world through food. So food is very important to me.
What you described about the gefilte fish and then the strudel, I suppose, was, even though the term didn't exist then, that this was kind of unintended fusion, that you had a Mexican-Jewish culinary fusion here. You mentioned gribenes, just one more note. My mother would make her own. And as a kid, I thought it was a treat, actually. I know that today we would look at it and say, wow, that's loaded with cholesterol. But as a kid, frankly, I couldn't wait to have some of that crunch from the gribenes. Well,
how did you eat them? How did you eat them? Just on their own?
Well, she would, kind of render her own chicken fat.
Yeah.
And then it would be on the fat would be used later on for it put in mashed potatoes or to do something else. And the little curls of skin would be there. And, I would take a few and chomp on them. So that's what it was like. It was like a snack. Well, I'd like to, if we can, before we talk about La Frontera, let's see a brief trailer for the program.
The idea of the border has profound meaning to me.
That's Texas. That's Mexico.
I was born and raised in Mexico. then moved to America and I'm raising my family here. And I've spent my career traveling my homeland, sharing Mexican food and culture with the world.
Are you with me? I want to tell you things.
Now, I'm setting my sights directly on the place where my two beloved countries meet. I'm traveling the Texas-Mexico border, from far west Texas to the Gulf of Mexico, to get a taste of life in this truly unique place, where food, art, music, families, and traditions come together to create something that cannot exist anywhere else.
Welcome to South Texas. We're just starting.
Oh, yeah. Take me there. Take me there.
So, Pati, let's talk about La Frontera, your most recent project. What made you want to explore the U.S.-Mexican border, and why now?
Oh my gosh, Dan, I am so obsessed. So with the border, with the borderland communities, with La Frontera, with all sorts of borders between countries, between cultures, between people, between families, inside of communities. We're full of borders, right? And fronteras. And after 10 years of producing Pati's Mexican Table, which is a travel and cooking show where I really tried to break myths and preconceptions about Mexicans and the role of Mexicans in Mexico and the world, because as Mexicans, we have our own myths and preconceptions about ourselves. And after 10 years of going back and forth, for every season, I go to a different region of Mexico, meet with different people, and show how Mexico is a much diverse and rich country than we all think of. And it has so much more to give and enrich people's lives in terms of ingredients, traditions, food, meaning. And after going back and forth so many times, realizing how little I know of my own home country, and at the same time, my three boys, I have three kids, well, now they're men, but I have three sons who were born in the US and who are deeply Mexican American. They're so proud of their Mexican roots, but they're so, entrenched and love America and this country and what it's given our family. And myself, at the same time, being torn between continuing to grow roots to Mexico, because the more I don't live in Mexico and the more I research and share it through Pati's Mexican Table, the deeper the roots I grow there. And I'm very grateful for what it's done for my family. But at the same time, I'm growing a new set of roots here in the US that are just as deep and strong. And we live in a world and in a society where people make you feel like you need to choose one. You need to be one, you need to be fully one thing, and that you are less if you're part of different things. And that I've always had a conflict with that. As Jews, we're always questioned, as a Jew, where is your solidarity? Is it with Israel, the Jewish state? Is it with Mexico? Is it with the US? Is it where? And I always tell my kids that, as Mexican Americans, we have a double blessing. And as Jews, we have a triple blessing, because we have three countries, three cultures, three languages, three foods that we draw from and that we're blessed to have our lives be enriched. Think about it. We have tacos, we have hamburgers, and we have hot dogs, and we have, Israeli food, we have kebabs, we have all these things. So you have so many three rivers that enrich our lives. But at the same time, we have a triple responsibility to each of the three. And we are held to a higher standard for each of them. Because as you know, when you're a Jew, you do something, you do it wrong, it goes to blame on all the Jews, the same thing as Mexicans. So we're held to a higher standard, though my husband always thinks I exaggerate, but I truly believe this. And so we have a triple responsibility to do right by Mexico and represent in the US and show that we can enrich this country. And we have a responsibility to the US to show that we're worth it here. And we have a responsibility to Jews and Israel, showing that, we hold our heads high and we can represent and we can enrich at the same time. So anyways, all these feelings of coming and going and belonging to different places and making sense of all of that. And after jumping from the US to Mexico so many times, I kept getting drawn to La Frontera and that third dimension. And if there's myths and preconceptions about Jews and Mexicans, the myths and preconceptions about the border in the US and Mexico, not to say about other borders in the world, couldn't be stronger, deeper. The farther you get away from the border, the bigger the misconceptions, the more things are demonized and misunderstood. So I felt that responsibility to go there, and I started researching and interviewing people and visiting the border, and realized that it was these unbelievable, kind of magical realism place, because at the border and the borderland communities, the labels and categories that we understand don't apply anymore. You can be American, Mexican, Japanese, Jew, and people there have a switch, to swim through cultures and countries, and against all odds, they thrive through their daily life. And I found that I really wanted to try to understand and mostly bring the microphone to La Frontera. And what I found was so inspiring, so jaw-dropping, and incredible to see how a place that's so incredibly misunderstood has so much to offer, and how the border and the borderland communities, not in the US, Mexico, not only enrich one country, but two at the same time, and how they are resilient and resourceful against everything that's stacked against them. So anyway, we did La Frontera. It went from El Paso to Brownsville, and we just got renewed for a second season. So that was 2 hours. So we just got renewed, not for 2, but for 3 hours, which we're so excited about. And this is going to go from El Paso to Tijuana. So we're going to go through 3 US states, California, Arizona, New Mexico. And the stories that we're finding there in our research are just incredible. It's just not Americans and Mexicans. There's the crypto Jews, the Jewish communities that have lived on the border for such a long time, and nobody's recognized them and their contributions. There's the Native Americans that got split, that were one family, and suddenly one side was Mexican, one side was American. I did it the wrong way. There's the Haitians, there's the Ukrainians that just arrived, by the hundreds to Tijuana. And what happens when you have that border that becomes a micro world? It's so incredibly rich in knowledge, in culture, in culinary contributions, and it's just so easy to misunderstand. I know that was a mouthful, but I'm fascinated with the border.
I've watched the program, and I think you bring, in addition to everything else that you've said, you bring a certain energy to the idea of these cross-border similarities. I remember visiting El Paso, and just our hosts in El Paso taking us over across the border to Juarez for lunch, and then going back. And as I was watching the program, I think that this is very much what America is all about. That you can be, on the U.S. side of the border, you can be American and you can be Mexican, and you can enjoy your culture, your traditions on both sides. And I think this is really to the point, and especially today, where we have so much divisiveness over border issues, that the program brings really a good measure of understanding to what this is all about and what it can be. So I wish you luck. Any more surprises in the coming season that we should look out for?
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, I was just so surprised in the first season that, to be honest, most of the best stories that we shared were totally unexpected. Like, I don't know if you saw the second episode, when we go from the Laredos to Brownsville, we met with these Japanese American cattle ranchers. And they're these thriving women that come from a Japanese migrant family who used to farm in California. They got put in concentration camps when Pearl Harbor started. Then they were let out, but with nothing. They moved to Texas, became farmers again. And then this third generation, they started breeding Akaushi cattle, which makes for Wagyu beef. And they're making the most extraordinary meat, and they're selling it to really good Tex-Mex restaurants. So you have fajitas made with Wagyu beef by Japanese American women who, this woman married a Mexican who's like sixth generation. He doesn't even speak Spanish anymore. And so it's just it breaks the way you understand the world. So for the second season, I'm just very excited. I don't know how we're going to fit all the stories we're finding. I kind of hope that it were 10 episodes and not 3. But it's just fascinating. I don't know then what part I like the most, if when we're researching what we're going to do and what we're going to find and all the history behind the place, or when we're there, or the aftermath, which is the reactions from people that watch the show and say, I had no idea. People just think about the border in a very single dimension. And I just love the idea of coming without an agenda, and bringing the microphone and say, just share your daily life with us. It's a slice of the pie of the borderland life. And I hope that I'm able to do this in the, other side of the US, Mexico. But I really find that I have found a mission in just making people open their minds and learning new things through food, because I find that by way of food, you can't say no. It's the way we all connect. We all need to eat. It's our animal side that just makes that rational, whatever we learned, that's not letting us have a conversation with the other. When you bring a plate of food, that goes to the side because you just want to eat it. So,
well, it sounds like there's at least enough material for a third, a fourth, a fifth, and other seasons.
Yeah.
So we'll be watching. Tell us about your latest cookbook, which is Treasures of the Mexican Table. How does it differ from your previous 2 cookbooks? Yeah. What are some of your favorite recipes? But first, let me ask you the question. We realize that there's a large Mexican American population in the United States. Mexico is, of course, across the border. But what is it about the enduring appeal of Mexican food, particularly in this country?
I know, that is such a great question. I mean, Mexican food just has so much then. And I think it speaks to how much Mexico has. It is so rich in depth, in ingredients, in regional recipes. And I think one of the biggest things that I've learned of why Mexican food is so appealing is because it is unapologetic about its boldness. And it is, you can customize. When you say Mexican food, people immediately connect to, oh, it's relaxed, it's fun, it's a party. You say Mexican food, there's nothing stuffy about it. And you know that you can garnish however you want. You can customize however you want. And I always say that the food of a place resembles its people. And Mexicans, we're just like that. We're very accommodating. I remember when I moved to the US and we started making friends when our oldest son was born in Dallas, Texas. And we started getting invited to, little play groups or a birthday party, and we would get invites, and it would say, from 6 to 7:15. And I wouldn't understand, how can you be invited to a party and it has a starting time? Because in Mexico, when there's a starting time, it's kind of rude to get there on time, because that means you're not letting the host get ready. But then there's no end time. Like, the thing ends when it ends. Like, there is never an invitation to something that tells you the end, And I think Mexican food is the same way. You make a big batch of chicken tinga or birria or barbacoa, and it's something that you can eat with rice or beans, or you can tuck it into a torta, or you can make quesadillas, or it makes perfect leftovers to throw on pasta. And when you think about other food and other cultures, of course, every food is delicious. But if you think about French food, for example, which we love, it's kind of fussy and difficult, you know? But anyway, I just think the appeal of Mexican food has to do with its laid backness, with its generosity, with its festiveness, with its color, its warmth, and mostly how accommodating it is. You know, you want salsa, add it. You don't want salsa, you don't add it. And you asked me about what the difference between this cookbook and my others are. And I mean, this is the cookbook that has taken me the longest to write. It took me almost 5 years to put it together. It was a very ambitious project. And because I had already done the first cookbook and then the second cookbook with these, I put I put higher standards. You know, it has to be better than that one. It has to be better than that one. It has more recipes. I didn't want to repeat things. And I just dove in deeper into the regional heirlooms that people still don't know much about, that should be, you know, menu rotations in families. Every recipe that I tried had to have a story, had to have that accessibility that people could make it. But in a way, it was easier because now you can find every possible ingredient wherever you live in the US. If you don't find it in your market, you order it online. So I think this is a journey through Mexico's regions, where I just tried the food that captured the DNA of the different places.
What regions of Mexico are most intriguing to you?
Well, I'll tell you, and that is a great question. You're such a great interviewer. I will say that I started Pati's Mexican Table in my cookbooks, sharing the places and the food that I was homesick for, the places and the food that made me feel nurtured and at home, and that I wanted to share with the world, saying, this is the beauty of Mexico. This is the beautiful Mexico that I miss and know. And as the years started going on, I continued sharing what I knew. And then I started going to the places that I didn't know, you know. So I started Mexico City, Oaxaca, Puebla. Then I went to the Baja Peninsula. Then I went to Sinaloa and Sonora in the north, and places that I had never even set a foot on, even though I had researched their history, you know, when I was a political analyst. And I find that I am mostly fascinated with the places that I haven't been to. So my relationship with my viewers has really changed, because in the beginning, I was like showing them the things I love, whereas after a decade, now they're coming with me to explore as I learn more. And it's been a fascinating journey. So now I want to go wherever I haven't been, if I have except for Mexico City, which is my hometown. And I mean, you could do like 200 episodes of Mexico City. But except for Mexico City, I would rather go to a new place in Mexico for a new season, or a place that I have touched on very little, than a place that I really know. Even though when you go back to places, you find new things all the time. But I'm mostly fascinated with what I've yet to learn.
Well, for someone who writes a cookbook with hundreds of recipes, is it fair to ask this question? Is there a favorite recipe?
Oh my gosh, that is very unfair. I have to say, the one thing that I have from my cookbook at all times in my refrigerator is a salsa matcha. And this salsa matcha is my way of making a salsa matcha. It's like no salsa that you can think of. It's not like a salsa verde or a salsa for chips. This is like a marriage between chili crisp and a wet granola of sorts. This is a mixture of different nuts like pecans, walnuts, pistachios, pine nuts that are gently cooked in olive oil with garlic and some dried chiles like ancho chile, chile de árbol. And then it's all macerated and combined with a little bit of sugar and vinegar. And then you chunk it all up. And it ends up being this incredibly delicious thing that you can use on everything, like on top of avocado toast or on top of an omelette. It's absolutely brilliant on top of hummus. So I love salsa matcha. The more it sits in your refrigerator, the better it gets. So I think that's my go-to. But of course, I have birria in there. I have chicken tinga. I have incredible desserts and soups. I think when people think about Mexican food, most people think about tacos. And it's funny because we always like to say people that specialize in Mexican food like me. And luckily, there's so many more of us as the years go by in the US. We always say, we're much more than tacos, But the funny thing is that we can tackle everything. So when I was deciding in this cookbook with my editor what should go in a taco section, it's just that we can tackle the shoe we have on our feet, And so that is kind of how you can think about Mexican food. But there's beautiful things like a fish in a silky green sauce. I have a turkey for Thanksgiving. In Mexico, we eat turkey mostly in the New Year and Christmas. And that's one great thing in Mexico. The Jewish community, in a way, also celebrates like Easter and Day of the Dead and Christmas, not in a religious way, but because those holidays are such a part of the country and the culture, we get to eat the food, So Day of the Dead, you'll see Jewish families and kids sucking on sugar skulls and eating Day of the Bread. But anyway, I have all of those in my cookbook. I don't know. I couldn't choose a favorite, but the one thing that I have all the time is salsa matcha.
I wanted to mention that 10 or 12 years ago, you did a cooking demonstration for B'nai B'rith. It was one of our annual meetings at the Mexican Cultural Institute here in Washington. And the then ambassador of Mexico to the U.S. Was also there. Either way, the Institute was where you launched your cooking program that eventually became your Mexican Table series. And I'm so glad that we were able to experience that cooking. So it was our good fortune. And then at that particular moment, it seemed that really you were really beginning to take everything to the next level.
I was just starting then, Dan. I had switched careers. I was trying to be a food writer, and I was putting together a culinary program to teach Mexican cooking. And I really thought that I was going to teach Mexican cooking classes at home and that I was going to do food writing. But then I went to talk with the director of the Mexican Cultural Institute. Arturo Sarucan was incredibly supportive when he was ambassador of Mexico. He believed in the idea of having this culinary program. And it was how I started in teaching Mexican food. And the first classes that I taught there were so entrenched in political analysis, what I was doing before. The first classes that I did were like the foods of the Mexican Revolution, the foods of colonial Mexico, a historical menu on vanilla, in the time of the Totonacas in Veracruz, Papantla. And it was how I started speaking to the public and talking in public, which I hadn't done before. I remember the first time I used a microphone there. I thought I was going to do classes there that were small. And when they said, no, we really want to fill this room and have 100 people, I was so nervous. I had so much stage fright. For the first year, I remember feeling a knot in my throat and hearing myself, how my voice trembled. And I prepared so much for those classes. And now I love talking to people live. And the more unplanned, the better I am. I was asked to do a keynote speech when my oldest son graduated for high school. About changing careers and cultures here in the US, and try to give high schoolers advice of what they should look forward to, which is so difficult to say. I'm still trying to figure it out here now, right? But I remember I remember just saying, you never know where you're going to end up. So very, very different from what people teach you here in the US. I said, just when you feel like you're wanting to do something, don't research on it, just go do it. Because if you research too much, and you research too much on the obstacles and the competition and what it takes to do something, you're going to freeze on your tracks. So jump in blind, which I don't know if the parents were very happy with my advice. But yeah.
Well, it sounds like good advice. It worked for you, so it can work for others. I have to ask, Pati, what was it like cooking at the White House for President Obama's Cinco de Mayo dinner? Very few chefs have the honor of cooking for the president and the first lady and their guests. So tell us about that.
It was so incredible, Dan. It was the way the White House felt under the Obama administration. It was so classy, impeccable, elegant, yet humble and kind at the same time. They really made you feel like they were there, like guarding the space of everybody. It was so beautiful and unpretentious. And the food I cooked along with Jose Andres, of course, and his team, and we made everything. We cooked everything that you can imagine. There was ceviche, there was suckling pig, there was pibil, there was tacos, there was tres leches cake. There was so much food of everything. And I remember we had been working so hard throughout the day to put the meal together that when the event started and Obama took to the microphone to thank, everybody, I had run into the kitchen. It was like 6 p.m. We had been working since like 6 a.m. and I hadn't taken a bite of anything. So right when they said, it's going to start and we all can chill because the food has been set out, I ran to the kitchen to make myself a taco. And I remember I was taking a bite of the taco when I heard President Obama thanking everybody that cooked, including Pati Jinich. And I was in disbelief. I wanted to be there to see how someone had pronounced my name so right, because usually people in the US say Jinich as Jinich. And it was very humbling. And the fact that he took the time to learn everybody's last names. And then he took the time to meet everybody in the kitchen. And he said a few really beautiful words. He said, that he was so happy and proud that there was a Mexican and a Latina doing what I was doing in the US, and that he believed my show was very important. And I don't know how he found a way to just give all these messages to everybody there, and it was deeply meaningful, and it taught me life lessons.
Well, final question.
Yeah.
Going forward, you have so many different projects and different ways of reaching people. So what do you see as your responsibility? Maybe it's not responsibility. What do you see as the opportunity? That's probably a better word, to bridge divides in America through your cooking, through your cookbooks, through your TV programs, and now through La Frontera, which I think really brings it all together.
Yeah, I feel increasingly responsible because the more you are able to reach more people and the more people trust what you are saying and the content that you're saying, the more responsibility you feel. So I know I'm being very repetitive, but I feel so responsible to do really thorough research and to do right by what we include in the shows and episodes, and and the stories and the characters, to do justice by them, and mostly to give them the agency to not translate for them, to just bring them the microphone and let them speak and let them be. And increasingly, I feel like I have to go to the places that are more misunderstood and the places that have lesser of a chance to get a microphone. And that's why I decided to go to La Frontera after I had gone to Sinaloa, which is known as the Chapo land in Mexico, the place of drug cartels. And Sinaloa is one of the places in Mexico that produces most of the food for the country and for export. And you have really hardworking families with strong family values that are going through a lot and are growing so much produce that we are all eating. So I just felt like I had to come to all these misunderstood places and really try to shine a light on the depth of the issues. So I'm very excited about La Frontera 2, and I feel more responsible now that I have La Frontera 1, and I saw how many people saw it, and the emails that we've gotten, like waterfalls of emails and comments, and it had so much reach that I feel like we have to up it. We have to do, deeper, more meaningful stories, and just help get there and help get people get there.
Well, be sure to watch part 2 of the groundbreaking PBS primetime docuseries La Frontera, hosted by award-winning chef Pati Jinich. Premieres this spring. I think it's already on TV. Season 11 of Pati's Mexican Table debuts this fall, and Treasures of the Mexican Table, Classic Recipes, Local Secrets, the acclaimed best-selling cookbook, is available now wherever you purchase books. Pati, thank you so much for being with us today. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you.
Dan, thank you so much. You've been an incredible host.
Well, our thanks to James Beard award-winning chef and New York Times best-selling author Pati Jinich for joining us and sharing her rich, unique, and Jewish perspective on Mexican and American cultures. And thank you for tuning in to this conversation with B'nai B'rith. Now, if you enjoyed this interview, be sure to catch all of our programs by subscribing to the B'nai B'rith YouTube channel and liking us on Facebook. And be sure to visit our website, b'naibrith.org, to learn more about our important work, including our efforts supporting Ukrainian refugees in Poland, Moldova, and Romania, as well as those still within Ukraine's borders. For my guest, Pati Jinich, and B'nai B'rith, I'm Dan Mariaschin. Join us again soon.